here's the craziest thing is Cuomo said, none of the medical professionals are reaching out to this guy or helping this guy or saying anything or doing anything. And he goes, do you think they were just following the money? Chris, your network's #1 advertiser. You'll never guess who it was. Brought to you by Pfizer. Come on, dude. You were funded by Pfizer. Early 20th century, Joseph Stalin took over Russia. And one of the first things he started doing was collectivization via land grabs and cooperative farming, which it wasn't really like, hey, would you cooperate with us? It's like, cooperate with us or we will severely punish you and throw you in prison or kill you. And so it was collective farming. And the idea was we will usher in this utopia and everyone will have enough and everyone will be able to eat. And this will be this beautiful place and will be the shining light for the world to see. And of course, what actually happened is millions of people starved to death. Now, slowly, they began to change those policies so they didn't end up starving off their entire population, but they never apologized for them. And after Joseph Stalin died, they really cemented a new way of life, but they never admitted exactly what happened in the 1930s. And they began to rewrite the history books and to push propaganda and to gaslight the population into believing that what Joseph Stalin did was actually for the greater good. And any unintended consequences were just that. They were kind of like, you want to make an omelet, you got to crack a few eggs. Gaslit the society into thinking that these terrible decisions and these terrible policies that they pushed and propagandized for were all the way clean as the driven snow. Just so happened maybe a couple million people died. We won't really talk about that, and we will move on. Unfortunately, that kind of gaslighting, an inability to admit when a government was wrong, is nothing new. And we're seeing maybe a smaller version of that over the last several years. In the last couple of weeks, legacy media figures have come out and started admitting that maybe the COVID-19 vaccine, which was pushed with the full force of every possible thing that the community, government, media had to throw at us, maybe they weren't as safe and as effective as we were told. The New York Times ran an article this last week that said thousands believed COVID vaccines harmed them. Is anyone listening? All vaccines have at least occasional side effects, but people who say they were injured by COVID vaccines believe their cases have been ignored. Within minutes of getting the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine, Michelle Zimmerman felt pain racing up her left arm to her ear and down her fingertips. Within days, she was unbearably sensitive to light and struggled to remember simple facts. The article goes on, not only about the pain and devastation of this, but about people not listening. And there seeming to be political forces that are keeping medical professionals from taking COVID vaccine injuries seriously. So that's what the New York Times is saying today. But what were they saying in 2021, 2022? Well, here's a video from the New York Times, and it's called "Dying in the Name of Vaccine Freedom." This is from 2 years ago.
It's hard to watch the pandemic drag on as Americans refuse the vaccine in the name of freedom.
You're talking about an unproven, untested vaccine that doesn't even seem to really protect people because people who've gotten the vaccine are getting sick.
I went to one of the places with the worst vaccination rate.
I don't want a poison forced into me.
I'm tired of y'all trying to control us.
One of the best things we have is our own God-given natural antibodies.
It also has one of the worst COVID case rates in the country, the Ozarks.
So if you listen to everything that these people in the Ozarks who are being framed, right, as the ignorant dregs of society, if you listen to everything that they're saying, every medical professional is admitting those things are right now, that we do have natural antibodies, that if you have had COVID previously, that you have some level of immunity. They are admitting that this was a vaccine that was rushed significantly quicker than anything else that has gone out. And it was brand new technology. It wasn't even really a vaccine, which if you notice, they don't really call it that anymore. But this entire article is written to try and shame people and make people seem like fools who were not willing at that time to take the vaccine. And you lived through this. You remember this. You were crazy if you weren't going to get the vaccine and get the booster and get the next booster and next booster. And that's fine. And maybe you really did your research and you did that. That was great. I was leading a church all through that. And man, I just told people to do their research and make the best decision for them. We were not going to politicize it. My main point is we went from this to now the same company, the New York Times, pushing like, man, people have been injured by these vaccines and nobody's listening to them. And they felt so much pressure to take them. Isn't that weird? We'll look at another person who was really, really pushing and arguing with people who were not taking the vaccine for themselves, which is Chris Cuomo. His tune has also completely changed. Here's him talking to a medical professional who took the vaccine and has experienced serious side effects. And Cuomo actually shares that he has faced side effects as well. Let's look at that.
And that testing showed I developed several autoantibodies, many of them that some theorists or some scientists believe are attributed to this POTS, or positional tachycardia that you mentioned, where every time I stand, my heart zooms. So some of my autoantibodies look similar to people with long COVID, and I never had COVID. And that was proven through immunological studies of my blood. They could not find any viral antibodies.
We don't even really have an official finding on long COVID. And I know that's weird because I say that I have long COVID, but I only say that I have long COVID because the doctors who are treating me are calling it long COVID. Wow. And they say that they're not getting a whole lot of support from the government, because even though we are spending a lot of money in the U.S. On a specific effort to research long COVID, they take a long time. And I think there's really no incentive to get out in front of this because it's just bad PR, right? I mean, nobody's going to get patted on the back for saying, yeah, Sean's right. There's side effects on some of the vaccines or all of the vaccines that we should be talking about and figuring out how to treat. And there is long COVID and there's lots. Nobody wants to say that because it's all political now.
Right. And we're caught in the crosshairs of the politics. I thought all my
So we'll keep playing it, but I mean, anyone who was paying attention during quarantine and during lockdowns, it's difficult to hear Cuomo say, well, this was just all so political. It's like, hey, no joke, dude. Like, you were on the bleeding edge of that. Yes, it was political. And that's not, to me, the craziest thing he says.
Vaccine colleagues that championed me would be there to lift me up and help me. And in fact, they're the ones who turned around, dismissed, denied, and tried to censor and bury me.
What do they think? You're chasing money?
What's that?
What do they think? You're chasing money?
I think that it's just the taboo around, like you said, about vaccines. They're afraid that by showing my face, I'll drive vaccine hesitancy. But what they don't realize, and what I have come to realize, is that the censorship and the hiding of it is actually fueling vaccine hesitancy. If the government had just said, hey, these are novel vaccines, we don't, there will be reactions. Let's just have a program in place to deal with them, set up the fund, obligate the manufacturers to provide help or research. I think the citizens would have appreciated that.
They would have appreciated that. And really, that was my desire, is just honest reporting throughout the whole debacle, is just to go, hey, we have this vaccine. Here's what it is. Here's what the mRNA technology actually is. Here's what the data is showing. Here's how it skews in its efficacy across ages. Here's who we think should consider taking it, but you are taking some risk to yourself, and this is unproven, and so you just need to know that. Like, if everyone would have just been up front and trusted the public to make some decisions for themselves, that would have been beautiful. It's like, hey, here's what could happen. Really think through this. Talk with your loved ones. We would love for you to get it. We think it's going to be effective. But no, it's like, you'll never get COVID again, and you'll never spread COVID again, and it's completely safe, and it's the best thing that's ever been created, and God himself made it, and everyone's got to take it. And it's like, well, maybe, but I mean, do we know that for a fact, like for sure? And here's the craziest thing is Cuomo said, none of the medical professionals are reaching out to this guy or helping this guy or saying anything or doing anything. And he goes, do you think they were just following the money? Chris, your network's #1 advertiser. You'll never guess who it was. Brought to you by Pfizer. Come on, dude. You were funded by Pfizer. And now you're throwing shade because people are following the money? You're saying the medical professionals aren't taking the VAR's reporting system seriously because they're following the money? Dude, You were paid by the people who manufactured the vaccines for the whole pandemic. And so this is so wild. And if we remember back to how Cuomo was, here's him with Byron Donald. Now, this is a clip from the PBD podcast. And what they're asking, they're showing him this clip and then they're saying, Cuomo, now that you've changed your mind and you have long COVID and you're like mad at everybody else, do you apologize for this take back when you were on CNN, brought to you by Pfizer? Do you apologize for that take? So we'll look at how he used to act prior to all this, and then whether or not he apologizes for the shocking difference.
Everybody should know that about you, Byron Donald. You are not telling people to get vaccinated. You are not pushing it. You are not saying it's the right choice. You're saying you're not doing it and your family's not doing it, and you're leaving out of the equation that you can make other people sick, as if that doesn't matter. Okay?
Chris, did you not just hear my answer 30 seconds ago where I said, if you want to be protected from these variants and the original strain, please go get vaccinated. I promote you to do that. I just told you live on your own show that if you want to get vaccinated in America, go do it. But if there are Americans like myself who choose not to, please don't berate me for doing that. It is a personal choice I have made. It's my own healthcare. No, I am allowed to do that. I'm entitled to do
Byron, you're absolutely right to do it. You have a right to do it. Two different statements. Okay. Do you have the right? Of course, nobody's debating that except you guys as a false choice. What I'm saying is it right to do it? Have you spoken to a doctor? You're supposed to be a leader. Have you talked to the CDC and the people who are in Florida at the Department of Health about whether or not they think you made a good choice? Because if your answer is just then, well, I don't care what they say, this is me, I'm an American, that is being dumb as a proxy for being bold. And I don't think it's a good message because remember, it's not just you protecting yourself. It's you protecting me and other people from you. That's why you get vaccinated, not just for yourself. Important distinction. Go ahead.
Actually, the way vaccines work are to protect yourself. A vaccine basically gives you a special cocoon where you actually limit the worst harmful effects of the virus itself, or may not get it altogether, depending on your own personal physiology. So that's the way vaccines work. Now, to me personally, I did talk to a couple of doctors that I know about it. I told them I already had it and I'm 42. What do you think? And they said, yeah, you're fine. If that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it. They didn't come and say, no, you have to do it because of everybody else. Because if other people want to be protected, they have access to vaccines. Go get the vaccine. I would never tell anybody not to get vaccinated. I do totally support it if that's what somebody chooses to do.
Byron, I'm with you.
I don't know why this is hard. It's that simple.
Oh, listen, I totally agree with you. It is very simple. I think you're making it hard because you're seeing some kind of righteousness and a choice to do something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But again, that's your right. What I'm saying is something else. You're wrong about how vaccines work. You're only giving part of the prophylaxis, okay? The other aspect to why you take the vaccine is it also reduces, not completely, nothing is perfect, and certainly this vaccine is not, but it also reduces your ability to communicate the virus and make other people infected. That part matters too.
Okay, now that's resurfacing. We've had conversations, we've talked.
Okay, so now we're going to hear Cuomo's response to this. Is he going to apologize for this massive flip-flop?
About COVID. Tom and I are talking about the long vaccine and what that's doing. A lot of my friends are going through it. And
long COVID.
Not long vaccine, forgive me. Long COVID. A lot of friends are talking about it. We're 40, 50. You're sitting there saying, hey, what the hell is going on in my body? What's changed from that conversation with you and Byron to where you are today?
Well, a lot has changed and a lot needs to change that hasn't. Here's what matters to me about the clip. Apology? Of course not.
Would you expect anything else? We'll let him go a little bit longer, but that's the bottom line. Am I going to apologize for just being paid by Pfizer and completely attacking people who had great points? And now I'm making that same point on my own podcast and making money off of it. Am I going to apologize for just berating people and belittling people and telling them how dumb they were? No, I'm not going to do that.
Byron Donalds comes on my show now. Okay. Why? Exchange of respect was never personal. I believe as a leader at that time, you had a duty to be thorough in what you were putting out there as opposed to just playing politics. Okay. This was never as simple as vaccine good, vaccine bad. Politics made it that.
Okay. So just a bunch of obfuscation. I mean, I don't apologize because people have ideas and you should be nuanced, even though I wasn't allowing Byron Donald to be nuanced at all in that clip. And now I've embraced the nuance because things have changed and the fact pattern has changed and it's no longer popular and there's no longer a financial incentive to push anything with the vaccine. So this massive flip-flop has happened. Will there ever be any kind of an apology? I don't think so. I think there's just going to be a slow transition, and the New York Times kind of threw some bait in the water, see how it goes. Chris Cuomo, just kind of changed his mind. I also have long COVID. There's real effects to this. People are just chasing the money. This is one of the most well-known proverbs. It says pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. And the government does this all the time. And legacy media does this all the time. Public figures do this all the time. They just propagandize you, like in the 1930s, where this is going to be the best thing ever, collectivization, co-op farming, utopia is coming, and then millions of people die. And there's no apology. There's just gaslighting of like, well, that's not what really happened. I mean, I wasn't really forcing people to do this. There was never any kind of compulsion. I mean, we tried to make people lose their jobs if they wouldn't do this. But, I mean, make an omelet, got to crack a few eggs. We see leaders doing this in the ancient world. When you look at the story of Moses and Pharaoh, God would send these plagues and Pharaoh would be scared to death. And he'd be like, all right, I'm good. The people can go. And then the plague would leave. And over again, like in Exodus 9:34, when Pharaoh saw the rain and hail and thunder had stopped, he sinned again. He and his officials hardened their hearts. And there's cognitive dissonance that comes with realizing you're so wrong, and it's just easier not to acknowledge it. There is fear of losing what you have, whether that is your position or your status or your influence. And then at the core of all of it, there is just pride. And anyone who's paying attention sees things like this, and it naturally angers you. And I think that's okay. There is such a thing as righteous anger when you're just lied to and taken advantage of. At the same time, part of what we do as believers is when we see things like this, we should use them as mechanisms to cause self-evaluation, because what the government did on a macro level and the media did on a macro level, I can do easily on a micro level. And I can push standards and expectations on others that I'm not willing to be held to myself, or I can really stand for beliefs, and those beliefs change, when I get the actual fact pattern, I realize I'm wrong. And will I be willing to stand 10 toes down and apologize and say I was wrong and explain why I was wrong and explain why I've changed and thank the people who helped me change and apologize to the people that I misled? Hopefully I will be able to do that. And we can learn from this macro situation to be better people on a micro level, because pride goes before destruction, not just at a macro level, not just when the government is too prideful to admit its fault, not just when giant media companies are huge political figures, huge public figures. But for me, in my personal life, if I'm so prideful that I can't admit a fault and admit the damage that I've done, then it will lead to destruction. A haughty spirit, like I'm too good for this, or I'm over this, or I'm above this. It goes before a fall. And I don't want to fall, and I don't want you to fall either. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you are subscribed so you can stay up to date with all new content. And if you want early access, exclusive content, and monthly live Q&As, make sure to check out patreon.com/ClaytonTime.